and welcome to the Birds of Grasslands collaborative series by BirdLife International and the Global Alliance for Rangelands and Pastoralists. This series highlights key bird species and grasslands around the world in each of the 12 months of the 2026 International Year of Rangelands and Pastoralists.
Hello and welcome to this podcast. Today we will be talking about a very iconic, beautiful bird. It's the secretary bird. The secretary bird is the first of the 12 birds we'll be highlighting this year. It's our January bird, and this is part of an effort by the International Year of Rangelands and Pastoralists and BirdLife International to highlight the value of these incredible creatures for grasslands and pastoralists all over the world. My name is Javiera Perez Ribalta. I'm part of BirdLife International, and I'm going to introduce you now to our very special guest. His name is Cassie Carstens. He is the BirdLife South Africa Secretarybird Project Manager. He's a field ecologist and bird guide with over 13 years of experience working on the conservation of some of South Africa's most iconic endangered birds, including the southern ground hornbill, Cape parrot, and of course the secretary bird. With qualifications spanning heritage and cultural tourism, environmental management, and geography, Cassie is currently completing a master's in science in zoology focused on avian conservation ecology. His work combines extensive field experience with advanced GIS mapping, acoustic monitoring, and data analysis. Cassie has contributed to 13 peer-reviewed scientific papers and continues to research and on-the-ground conservation through his technical expertise and passion for birds. So welcome, Cassie. How are you today?
Very well, thanks to you, Javiera. Thank you very much for the opportunity. It's wonderful to be here. And to be first in this series, it's a bit of a privilege, so thank you.
Yes, I'm very excited. We're going to talk about a bird that I personally find quite intriguing. It's one of my favorite birds. So just to get us started, what would you say, Cassie, to people who perhaps never heard of a secretary bird? Why is this bird so special, so iconic? Why is it the first bird that we aim to spotlight this year?
Well, if you think about grasslands in Africa, then that's probably the first species that comes to mind. It's one of our big raptors, and it's endemic to the continent, which makes it an absolutely iconic species, as you mentioned earlier. They are a wonder to observe in the wild, and to be able to work with them is an amazing privilege. If you haven't seen one yet, for those of you who haven't had the chance to travel to Africa yet, they are sub-Saharan, that's where they occur. And wherever there's open grassland in either the savanna or some of the more arid areas, that's where there's a high chance of finding them. They stand about 1.3 meters, so just at my hip. They've got a wingspan of about 2 meters. Yeah, they're big birds. They weigh up to 4 kilograms, 4.5 kilograms for adults. And they are one of Africa's long-lived raptors. There are cases where birds in captivity have lived up to 40 years. In the wild, I think our oldest bird that we know of is about 15. So there's quite a lot about this species that piques the interest of any keen bird watcher or someone that's interested in the wilds of Africa. So if you haven't seen it, big bird, long legs, thin legs with feet like golf clubs, which they use to kick snakes. It's possibly the thing that they're most known for. Wonderfully gray, as it's blue-gray, and black feathers. They've got long black leggings, which is quite awesome to see. And then their facial coloration, this yellowy orange, darkens during the breeding season for adults. So the most awesome thing is they've got long tail streamers. So their two central tail feathers stream out way beyond their body. And in flight, that's possibly one of the most beautiful things to see. So yeah, amazing species. And if you haven't seen one and you have the opportunity to travel to the continent, do so. Don't wait.
And you work very closely with them, right? Tell me
Yes.
about your job. Like, what's your job? How long have you been working with them?
So I've been with BirdLife now since 2023, January of that year. And my job is trying to conserve the population and study the population in South Africa. So if you look at the global population, secretary birds are endangered. The population has declined dramatically over the past 2 decades in South Africa as well, although we still consider ourselves to be one of the stable populations on the continent. In West Africa, we fear that the species might be completely disappearing. If you travel to East Africa, there's a low likelihood of you finding them outside of the big conservation areas. And in the southern parts of the continent, yes, things are looking rather dire. And the project that I work for has been running for more than a decade, started in 2011, and that coincided with the birds downlist, or what's it, uplisting. Is that the bad one? Uplisting is the bad one in IUCN, right? When they went
Yes.
from least concern to suddenly vulnerable. So that's when the project started. We realized that, oops, something is happening and we need to start seeing what is the problem, what are the threats that they face. And we focus on a couple of things. So my program or my project falls within BirdLife South Africa's largest species conservation program, and we are very threat focused. So I've got colleagues working on vultures that focused on lead poisoning. I've got a colleague working on pesticides in the agricultural industry, and then mine is more infrastructure, you could say. So looking at the impacts that wind energy, long linear infrastructure like power lines and fences have on the birds, and then, of course, habitat loss, which is an issue across the board for most species of conservation concern. So I've got a long history. We've got a big data set, and we're finally in a position where we can actually start looking at some of the data to really create wonderful conservation and mitigation strategies for the species in South Africa.
Yes, and we'll definitely go further understanding what the threats for this species are. But first, I wanted to ask you, Cassie, what's with this name? The name is so bizarre. Can you perhaps explain a little bit?
There's, I had to like rack my brain the other day to think about where it comes from because someone asked me the same question. There's a few. There's two main schools of thought that I'm aware of, and I probably need to put my glasses on so that I seem slightly more professional with discussing the intricacies of the nomenclature for the species. The one is that it's based on a Arabic origin word, secretar, which, don't quote me on this, means the hunter or something approximating that. So that might be the best. And then the secretary bird, of course, the birds have got these awesome elongated neck and head feathers that form a crest that looks like, let me get my pencil behind my ear, that look like a secretary back in the day with the pencil stuck behind the ear with these feathers sticking out. So those are the two schools of thought. So like pick one. We don't really know. The species was named such a long time ago, and of course, not always documented well what the origin was. There probably is somewhere where someone wrote it down nicely, and if someone finds it, please let me know, and then we won't have to have this roundabout again.
Yeah, very interesting. I had heard about the hypothesis with the middle-aged secretaries dressing similarly or something like that. But it's
Something
just
like
such a
that.
ridiculous way to look at it. It's just very funny.
Exactly.
And obviously these birds stand out because of those very, very long legs and the way they walk.
Yeah.
Which is also their secret weapon, right? So they're called
Yes.
snake hunters by some. They're also called the snake eagle. Could you tell us a little bit more about what they eat and how they hunt?
Okay. So killing snakes is possibly the thing that they are most known for. So, with those long legs, they are able to exert a massive amount of force. So, there was a study done a couple of years ago where they had a bird in captivity with a pressure plate and a bit of fake grass on top of that and a fake plastic snake. And this bird kind of went to town on it. And they found that the birds are able to multiply their body weight 4 times. So, if you now take a bird that weighs 4.5 kilograms, that's almost 20 kilograms that this bird is able to kick out. So they are able to stun, immobilize, and sometimes outright kill their prey items. And yes, snakes is the most amazing thing. Despite being a bird watcher for more than a decade and a half and studying the species now for going on 3 and a bit years, I still haven't seen it. And I'm so keen to one day see them actually eat a snake. But despite that being such an awesome part of their behavior, snakes make up a very small proportion of their diet. So it's majority insects, up to 70%. That's one of the diet studies in South Africa that showed that. And then small mammals make up the bulk of the rest, with reptiles snakes and lizards, and then amphibians, and sometimes even small birds, like filling in the last few gaps. So despite snakes being such an awesome thing that they do, the insects seem to be the main fare that they forage and hunt for.
So they seem to have a good variety of options when it comes to their diet.
Mhm.
That's really interesting. And the other thing that I found quite interesting about them, but I'm not sure if this is true or not. Is it true that they are monogamous birds?
I'm always afraid to state that outright, that yes, they are, because some of the species, most notably southern ground hornbill that I worked with in the past, we also believe that they are monogamous, and then genetic testing comes out that shows the contrary. So let's say that they are currently believed to be monogamous. So there are pairs. We don't really understand their territorial behavior 100% yet. That's one of the things that I'll be looking into. And let's say we assume so, but I'm excited to be proven different if that is the case. So yeah, no idea, to be honest, but we assume so.
Okay. So when it comes to caring for the eggs and the chicks, do both parents take a role? Can you explain a little bit more how that dynamic work?
Yeah, so there is a bit of a lead up to any breeding event. So secretary birds nest on small shrubs and small trees. Let's say anything between 3 and 5 meters seems to be the average. And if there are thorns on said tree or shrub or bush, then the better. And they create a platform of sticks and grass on top. Females lay between 1 and 3 eggs, normally asynchronous over the course of a couple of days, and both male and female incubate. So incubation is between 40 to 45 days. And that's one of the most vulnerable periods in their breeding, because sometimes the handover between the pair isn't perfect. So there are cases where nests are predated by avian predators, for instance, corvids, that we just find broken eggs on top of a nest platform. So both pairs need, or both individuals need to be on the ball with regards to how they care for a nest. And then as soon as the eggs hatch, normally all of them hatch. And unlike other raptors, these ones are awesome and very friendly, and they really like each other. There's no siblicide. So if there's sufficient food, then all of the nestlings will survive. If there's a bit less food than would be like optimal, then normally the smallest or the youngest one sadly succumbs. But over the past breeding season, which has been my most prolific or my busiest, the average was 2 nestlings per nest by far. I think there's only, of the 15 nests that I did, there was only 3 where there was 1 nestling. And all of them started with like 2 to 3 eggs. So the nestling period is between 10 and 11 weeks, and they steadily grow through that process. They eventually fledge at about just over 4 kilograms in body weight at about 10 to 11 weeks. And then these youngsters spend a couple of months just exploring progressively wider and wider around their natal nest before they disperse. So that's their rough breeding ecology. And currently I am in the midst of said breeding season. I am traveling to the Mpumalanga province in South Africa tomorrow to go and ring 4 more nestlings. So that'll be nests number, I think, 24 and 25 for this season for me. And that's just the few that I've been able to get to. I know that there must be so many more. So it's been rather amazing to be this close to them over the past couple of months.
It's very cool because their nests appear to be huge, honestly, on the
Yes,
photos I've
yes.
seen. And they build them just on the very top of trees. Is that where they usually do them?
Yeah. So it's an interesting behavior. I've never seen it. It's been reported that they spend a day or so kind of flattening the top of the canopy, just kind of stepping it flat, maybe breaking a couple of branches, and then progressively they start carrying big sticks into the nest, layering them, and then smaller sticks, and then some of the camera trap footage that we've recorded at nests, they tear out clumps of grass and then just deposit that onto the nest as well. And through use, of course, the parents will use it as a roost prior to a breeding event and throughout the year if they're not breeding. And that just accumulates and accumulates. So some of these nests, they are not just big in circumference, if you now look at the total top of it, but in depth, if you now think of how much grass, how much plant material has been layered on top and compacted. It's absolutely massive. I think the biggest one, I've never been able to measure them because I don't want to like get bloodied and torn up climbing into a thorn tree to try and measure it. But some of them is more than 1.5 meters in like height, if you want to put it that. But that more width, I don't know exactly how to describe it. But yeah, these nests are sometimes massive, sometimes very small. There are ones that the nestlings are quite shoved. It's quite a close growing up period for them. So it's amazing to see and to get that close.
That is really impressive. So, Cassie, I want to move us now to understanding more about the habitat for the secretary bird, because obviously we're talking about this is an iconic bird for grasslands. But tell us more
Yes.
about what kind of grasslands they prefer, and then we can probably move into understanding how grassland threats or the threats to the habitat loss also affect them.
Okay. If you now think of the African continent, savannas might be the first big biome that comes to mind. So if you think of Kenya or Tanzania with big rolling grasslands with the odd thorn tree, that is kind of what we're talking about. So open savanna with scattered trees, open grassland, the few places on the continent where that occurs. So open arid areas, like if you go into Botswana, for instance, the Kalahari, where there's still a lot of trees, that's where the species will be. In South Africa, the higher parts of the country, so the interior of the country is on a higher plateau, and that is mostly grassland. And the tracking data from our long-term project that we've been following them shows that to use the real estate parlance, location, 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 grassland, grassland, grassland. So if you boil down the habitat in which, or the landscape type in which these birds move most often, grassland seems to be the bigger biome. Yes, it's with scattered trees or sometimes denser or thicker, give or take. But grasslands in the South African context with our tracking data seems to be their most preferred habitat. So yeah, most important. And grasslands, as you'll know, and as your listeners will know, that grasslands are one of the biggest, or the biome across the globe that is under most threat. And in South Africa, that is especially the case as well. So yeah, that is one thing that we need to protect.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and as we know, grasslands face a huge variety of threats. They're undervalued and underprotected in general. So perhaps if you could walk us through, which do you think are the most important threats that the secretary bird is suffering at the moment?
Let's do them the other way around. Let's go from least, or like not necessarily least, but most significant, least significant to most significant. So
Okay.
if I can be now, be slightly difficult. So my project focuses on infrastructure. So we're talking about wind turbines as one. So the wind industry, the renewable energy industry, is something that is expanding quite rapidly across the globe. And secretary birds are one of the species that are under threat with the building of wind turbines. So their flight height is majority at low altitude. So we're talking that 50% of their flights take place below 30 meters, or between 30 and 40 meters. That's from the little bit of tracking data we have. So that is right bang in the hitting window of wind turbines. Then long linear infrastructure is the other one. So collisions with power lines is a big issue. So in South Africa specifically, with the expansion of our renewable energy industry, we need ways to distribute that power. So the expansion of the power grid will result in more power lines across at least across the country. And even though we don't have a lot yet, there's a small database being maintained by our power utility, and secretary birds do make up a small proportion of those numbers of the reports that do come in. So on my database, which I share with them, I've got more than 100 birds that have collided over the past little bit more than a decade. It doesn't sound like a lot, but that's just the ones that were found. And then collisions with fences is the other one. So, South Africans love their fences, and yeah, it's everywhere. And these birds either get entangled and then suffer a very, very horrible death, or collide with them. So that's an issue touching not just secretary birds, but many other grassland species as well. But then the big thing, as with most other species across the globe that face any threat, habitat loss is the issue. And in South Africa, with our rapidly expanding economy, and development taking place, the loss of habitat, the fragmentation thereof, and then the degradation thereof is one of the big issues that threaten these birds, possibly the biggest. So if you look at the center of our country, so our Gauteng province, where our largest cities are located, Johannesburg and Pretoria, the peripheries of that, which used to be grassland, is now this network, this little, what's the best way to describe it? There's a wonderful word for it in Afrikaans. I'm not trying to rack my brain to think about the English version thereof. Fragmented is possibly, let me just use that. I'm not going to even get on the Afrikaans now. That has even slipped my mind. But it's this loosely clustered, fragmented landscape that these birds then need to exploit with small pockets of grassland remaining. It's something that we internally, or we still need to look at that in detail, term foraging islands, that they need to jump between these small little patches where there's still habitable grassland available. And it shows in some of the tracking data for some of the adult birds during breeding seasons in the developed parts of the country and then the lesser developed parts of the country, where the home ranges are vastly different, like at orders of magnitude bigger in these developed areas where these birds need to travel much further in order to find sufficient food. But in other areas, the home range is nice and small. They can find sufficient food just around the nest. So yeah, it's an interesting thing to try and keep in mind. How do you reconcile development, the need for development in South Africa with the protection of this habitat? It's a difficult thing that we will need to deal with.
Yeah, you're asking the big questions now, Cassie.
Lighten the load then.
But no, and it seems that you guys at BirdLife South Africa are doing a lot from different angles. So that's super interesting. And I know that part of your work also has a lot to do with research and sort of understanding what are the data gaps and what's still unknown about this bird. So perhaps you can talk us a little bit more about that.
I've briefly mentioned it, and we can focus on quite a few, but let's focus on this one. Adult breeding movement is currently the big one that we're interested in. So we've got a long-term tracking study, the longest for the species in existence. So it's running on 12 years now, 12, 13 years that we've been following birds. We've had 24 individuals on which we've deployed GPS trackers, and only a handful of them have survived to adulthood to start breeding themselves. So there were 4 cases or 4 birds that successfully bred, 5 cases or 5 breeding attempts. And that's the first time that we've managed to record adult breeding movement. And with that, we hope to update our mitigation strategies for development. So currently the buffer zone that we recommend for either solar or any other renewable energy is 1.6 kilometers, but that's based on juvenile movement. So juvenile movement around a nest for that couple of months after they fledged, that's within an average 1.6 kilometer radius of the nesting site, which now immediately sounds not enough for adults. And the data that we have show that adults, yes, move considerably further. So to use that to advise an updated, improved mitigation strategy going forward is something that is critical for us. But now trying to get enough data is the big thing. We normally deploy the trackers on young birds. They are quite easy to fit the GPSs on. You just get them at the nest and you deploy the GPS tracker, and then you keep your fingers crossed that the GPS lasts that long or that the bird doesn't have any other issue facing their life that causes a fatality. So yes, we've only had the handful survive to adulthood, and we hope to in future possibly start trying to capture adults to deploy GPS trackers on them to immediately get that type of data. But I still need to figure that out. Colleagues of mine have managed to do that, so I hope to learn from them to improve my skills. So that is our current biggest gap in our knowledge. So how do the adults use the landscape? And we hope to pretty soon.
And of the ones that you've tracked, I don't know if you have this number, Cassie, or if I'm putting you in a complex position, but what's the longest that they walk in a day? Because they seem to walk kilometers and kilometers, right? Do you know how far they can walk?
Easy between 20 and 30 kilometers a day. And that's
Wow.
just point to point. Remember now, a GPS records on a set schedule. and the bird can do anything between two recording intervals. So we just take the straight line distance between each point, but the bird could have wandered considerably further. It could have meandered like around a hill before the next GPS was recorded. And I just take the shortest distance. So it is an underestimate, I think, with regards to their total distance moved. So yeah, they are true like ultra marathon walkers on a
Yeah,
daily basis. So it's
that's
amazing
just
to think
crazy.
that they can do it.
Cassie, one last topic I wanted to ask you about because I think it's really interesting is the work that you're doing with cattle ranchers because obviously there's a big overlap between the habitat for this bird and a lot of cattle grazing happening in the area. And there's a way for cattle grazing to be a bit more bird friendly, right? Could you perhaps walk us a little bit through that?
Yes. Uh, That's one of the saving graces, and I think the reason behind the strong population or the big population in South Africa is the fact that we've got a very, very big cattle ranching industry in South Africa. It forms a big part of our agriculture. So we do have croplands as well. That's one of the issues. We touched on the threats to grasslands, and the transformation of grassland to cropland is one of the issues that reduces the foraging ability or the movement ability of secretary birds. But saving grace, we do have a lot of cattle, and cattle ranches normally in South Africa, they're big. Cattle are normally free ranging. Yes, there are feedlots where cattle are normally located prior to slaughter, but in the area where most of my research takes place, which is the Eastern Free State, it's the center part of the country, they are big, big open grasslands, and yes, the secretary birds come along with that. So I deal quite closely with cattle ranchers on a regular basis, and there's a few things that we try and encourage. So I'm not a cattle rancher, so I don't know cattle, but I do know birds, and I hope to find some middle way in between the two needs. And the grazing specifically, we recommend no real overgrazing. Their prey base, which is now rodents and insects, do rely on some cover for the animals to hide or to propagate themselves. And the secretary birds don't mind grass that come up to, let's say, our knees. They do move in thicker grassland areas because, yeah, there might be sufficient food for them. But if it's completely overgrazed, that'll lead to a reduction in the prey items. So that's an issue. And then grazing certain critical areas. So, for instance, wetlands, secretary birds, we have, in some cases, they focus on specific prey animals, and there's a few of them that seem to like wetland rats and wetland small mammals, rodents. So if cattle graze in those at a great extent, again, it leads to that a loss of prey base. And we also try and encourage certain burning practices, specifically around nesting sites, that burning shouldn't necessarily take place during the breeding season. These birds start breeding from late winter, which is unfortunately our burning season, and then into summer. So I'm still busy. So hopefully, by encouraging that, farmers will at least provide some grassland remaining around nesting sites where the birds can still forage sufficiently. So yeah, there's a few more with regards to fence line construction. Colleagues of mine are working on fence design that might be a little bit more bird friendly, but still meet the needs of cattle ranchers. So there are quite a few things that we try and work with. It keeps us busy, keeps our plates full.
Really, really cool work, Cassie, and thank
Thank
you
you.
for doing that. That's very important work that you guys are doing. So
Thank you.
for everyone listening, what would you recommend, Cassie, if they want to know more about your work or they want to support it in some way, if you can direct them somewhere?
Great. So on BirdLife South Africa's website, it's birdlife.org.za. Just in the text bar or the search box, just type Secretary Birds. It'll take you to our Secretary Bird project. Every now and then, I might post something new about the tracking study. We are busy redesigning our website, so if it's not brilliant yet, wait, it'll be considerably better very, very, very soon. And there's some basic information on both the species and the work that we do, in addition to all the other amazing project that BirdLife South Africa runs. So go have a look, spend some time. And yeah, if you come across a secretary bird in the rest of the African continents, the easiest way is to record them on one of the smartphone apps with which you add your or create bird lists. So eBird, I know, is the one that is most prevalent across the globe. In South Africa specifically, we've got something called BirdLife, which you can use across the African continent as well. But I think eBird might be something that is a bit more widely available to people traveling to the African continent. So yeah, go have a look at our website, and if you see a secretary bird, do find a way of recording it. That data is something that is incredibly valuable across the continent. So yeah, please do that.
Great. Well, I think we've come to the end of our podcast. Cassie, thank you so much for being with us today and sharing your knowledge. It's been a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you very much.
And with that, I just want to invite you to stay tuned. We have a lot more of very interesting grasslands and birds material coming up. This is all for me now, but I want to thank the International Year of Rangelands and Pastoralists for opening this space to talk about grassland birds. And also a huge thanks to Lawrence Bejar for the production content of this podcast. Talk to you soon and have a great day or evening, depending on when you're listening to this.